The storm surrounding Labour's leadership has reached a boiling point, with critics unleashing a torrent of fury after a record-breaking day of illegal channel crossings exposed cracks in Keir Starmer's immigration policies. On a single December day, over 600 migrants braved freezing conditions to reach UK shores, marking the highest number ever recorded for this month since data collection began in 2018. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp didn't hold back, branding it a day of shame for Labour and slamming their inability to deliver on promises to secure Britain's borders. This scathing critique comes as Home Office figures reveal a dramatic 18% increase in crossings compared to the same period last year. With the government claiming that over 21,500 migrants have made the dangerous journey since Starmer took office in July, the numbers paint a damning picture of Labour's immigration failures. If you thought that was shocking, stay tuned, because the scandal doesn't end there. Labour's controversial decision to cancel the Rwanda deportation scheme before it even began has added fuel to the fire, sparking claims that the government's inaction has emboldened people smugglers and left Britain's borders wide open. Critics are now asking the question, has Labour truly lost control? Stick with us as we unpack every explosive detail of this crisis, along with the devastating ripple effects it's causing, both at home and abroad. Now, here's where it gets even more jaw-dropping. Over the past 3 days alone, more than 1,150 migrants have crossed the Channel, despite harsh weather that briefly stalled their efforts last week. Numbers are soaring beyond what anyone expected this winter, with the total for the year now standing at 35,130 migrants. Even maritime security insiders admit that enforcement measures have barely dented smugglers' operations. And if you thought Labour had a handle on this, think again. The backlash is growing and tensions are simmering between Labour officials and international partners. As we unravel this political disaster, make sure to like, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the details we're about to uncover will leave you speechless. Labour's problems didn't begin yesterday, but the latest figures have thrown their failures into sharp focus. In July, just months after Keir Starmer's government took over, the first signs of trouble began to emerge. Crossings spiked dramatically as Labour's decision to scrap the Rwanda flights created what critics are calling an open invitation for illegal migrants. Under the previous government's plan, migrants arriving via small boats were set to be deported to Rwanda to deter future crossings. But Labour, under pressure from activists and facing legal battles, shelved the policy before it could even take off. Chris Philp has made Labour's reversal a key point of attack, claiming that the deterrent would have stopped smugglers in their tracks and saved lives. If the Rwanda flights had been allowed to start in July as planned, illegal immigrants would not bother attempting to cross, he argued, labelling Labour's decision a catastrophic failure. And it's not just talk, the numbers seem to back him up. This year alone, nearly 35,000 migrants have crossed the Channel, with some sources saying the figure could have been far higher if recent storms hadn't disrupted the smugglers' routes. With the crisis now spiralling out of control, Labour officials have scrambled to defend their record, claiming they've inherited a broken system. A spokesperson for Downing Street attempted to shift the blame, stating, "This is the chaos we inherited from the previous government." But critics aren't buying it. Despite Labour's repeated assurances of having a serious, credible plan, their strategies have failed to deliver meaningful results. Philp has hammered Labour on this point, saying, "This isn't just incompetence, it's negligence." With 21% more crossings than last year, it's hard for Labour to argue otherwise. Meanwhile, Home Secretary Yvette Cooper has been thrust into the spotlight as she scrambles to regain control of the narrative. This weekend, she flew to Italy for emergency talks with European leaders, aiming to secure stronger international cooperation to tackle the crisis. Her focus has been on cracking down on the criminal smuggling gangs that profit off desperate migrants, often forcing them into deadly journeys across the Channel. Cooper has announced a raft of measures to strengthen border security, including enhanced technology at ports and new agreements with European partners to disrupt smuggling networks. She's also emphasised the importance of tackling the problem upstream, targeting the gangs before they can send boats to UK shores. But her sudden flurry of activity has done little to quell the growing criticism. Some are calling it a case of too little, too late. The situation isn't just a logistical crisis, it's a political minefield. As Cooper meets with Italian officials, the government's handling of the migration issue is sparking outrage back home. Reform MP Rupert Lowe has added fuel to the fire by attacking Labour for what he calls blatant hypocrisy in its approach to fairness and diversity. Lowe's comments come in the wake of a shocking revelation. Certain government internship programs have banned white applicants, restricting opportunities to candidates from Black, Asian and minority ethnic (BAME) backgrounds. The Environment Agency in particular has faced backlash for enforcing a policy that excludes white students from applying to certain roles. Lowe has labelled this as overt racism, accusing the government of funding discriminatory practices with taxpayer money. His criticism didn't stop there. In a blistering letter to the Environment Agency, he called out the organisation's exclusively white senior management team for failing to reflect the very diversity they claim to champion. If they're serious about diversity, Lowe argued, they should step aside from their highly paid roles and lead by example. The controversy has reignited fierce debates over diversity hiring and merit-based recruitment, with many accusing Labour of embracing performative policies that do little to address systemic issues. Even intelligence agencies like MI5 and MI6, which have implemented similar programmes, are facing growing scrutiny. Critics argue that these policies, while lawful, are counterproductive and fuel resentment among those excluded from opportunities. Amid all this turmoil, Labour's focus has turned toward damage control. Officials are working overtime to reframe the narrative, emphasising their commitment to tackling illegal immigration while doubling down on the need for diversity in public institutions. But the backlash shows no signs of slowing, and Labour's mishandling of these overlapping crises has left them vulnerable on multiple fronts. The international stage isn't offering much relief either. At a recent meeting of the Calais Group in London, UK officials joined representatives from Germany, France, Belgium and the Netherlands to discuss long-term solutions to the migration crisis. While Germany has pledged to tighten its laws against people smuggling, critics argue that Labour's efforts to secure similar commitments from other nations have been lacklustre at best. Back in the UK, the public's patience is wearing thin. With over 21,500 migrants crossing the Channel since July, the government's repeated assurances of having the situation under control are ringing hollow. Maritime security sources have warned that enforcement measures so far have caused only minor disruptions to smugglers' operations. And with winter weather offering only a temporary reprieve, the crisis is set to escalate further in the coming months. Labour's leadership is at a crossroads. The rising numbers, the public outrage, and the growing sense of chaos all point to one thing: their credibility is on the line. Whether they can turn the tide or sink further into scandal remains to be seen. But for now, one thing is clear: Keir Starmer's government is facing a reckoning it cannot ignore.